Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome back to Out of the Park Baseball 23. We are on episode number 2 of our brand new Let's Play series. Of course, this is the Tier 3 Challenge. It's a promotion relegation series. If you did not see the first episode, make sure you go back and check that one out. Also, thank you to the community for the huge welcome into the series. Episode 1 was very well received. In fact, it's a rarity to see it on YouTube kind of at all, but 100% like rate, not a single dislike click. So thank you on that part, and also a quite high percentage of you took the time to click that like button. For the YouTube algorithm to really do its trick, though, and that first episode is looking pretty dang good for that. I never get YouTube boosts via algorithm at this stage in the size of the channel. That the exposure is quite minimal, but this one has started off pretty well with this new release. That being said, it does take 3 episodes for the algorithm to really boost a series itself and not just a single individual episode. So please take this opportunity, and then of course one more with episode number 3 upcoming, to scroll down below, click that like button. If you have not already, do click subscribe, and let's go ahead and get into the content here on this one. YouTube algorithm comments also helpful. All right, so we are 3 days into the season. We have a 2-1 record. We just came off a road victory. Of course, these first 3 games were on the road at San Antonio, and we managed to get a 10-inning victory, winning 6-5. So starting off with a winning record on the road, already a good sign. And in terms of the weekly power rankings, where they have us placed, San Antonio is 19th. We are 13th. Now, in terms of what that all amounts to, I don't know. Here's the thing: Monterey, Omaha, Panama City, San Jose. I mean, those top 5 teams very well could be winners of all 3 games. The bottom 5 teams are probably the 5 opponents that those 5 had at the top of the weekly power rankings. I would not be surprised at all if they are going mostly off of record here compared to anything else, and that those that are 2-1 are all falling in the range of 6th place at a 123 down to 15th at a 120. Those that are 1-2 are the next set. So the only comparison that we have here is either like a run differential, small factors separating 6th to 15th. When you look at that, the fact that they have us down in 13th could be a sign that maybe it's a roster evaluation. Maybe we are seen as being weaker. I don't know. It's too early to say, in that our sample size is much too small. Therefore, let's start building up that sample size just a little bit. We need to see some player performance. We need to see some overall team performance over at least a couple weeks into the season before we can properly judge anything. Unlike other sports where you really get into it and every game counts, like, say, American football, where you have a season of 16 games, or, in the world of world football, aka soccer in the US, where, an entire season is 30 to 40 games, at least for your league, that is. We have a 144 game season. So going 14 games into it still is a hair shy of 10%. It's barely scratching the surface on getting an idea on where your team sits. So let's do that. Let's get an idea where the team sits, and then we'll start to make our first foray into tweaking things. Right, so everybody is about 14 to 15 games into their season now, and we take our first look at the standings with this, again, very small sample size, but enough to at least start getting a general idea. There are so many variables, though, to really impact things at this stage that it's still a bit early to take too much. But we can look at a couple things. We can look at Monterey with a 14-1 record and go, wow, okay, that team, that team is looking really, really, really strong. You can look at Guadalajara at 2-13 and go, okay, those guys are struggling, right? You can make a few easier judgments. Our division, for example, it's hard to split things up. We are in last place right now with a 6-8 record, 6 wins, 8 losses. However, San Jose with 9 wins and 6 losses, there is so little between us at this stage, with only a 2.5 games separating top to bottom. Without breaking it down further, San Jose could have been at home for a dozen of those games. We might have been on the road for a dozen of our games. There's a lot of factors that can go into that. In fact, just for an example here, over the last 10, San Jose is 4-6. So are we. So don't take the fact that we're in last place at the moment with too much concern. Let's look into the details a little bit. Baseball, unlike so many sports, is very, very, very stat driven. Okay, a lot of you are going to be familiar with a few key components of the sporting world, and we now exist in a very data driven experience. Whether it's track cycling, where they use the most finite details of measuring performance of the human body to get the last ounce, to get that one extra pedal stroke out of the athlete, or the world of world football, right? Soccer, as we refer to it here, where today you see a few teams that are very, very heavily. Brentford making it into the Premier League on a budget because they are so very heavily data focused. And seeing how teams select players that way, and seeing how a Manchester United fails miserably when they go after marketable players instead of players that actually fit a certain mold, that'll fit a certain play style and make the team ultimately better. There's tons of money in that team, and yet it's a team that really struggles to find success. And the only successes that it finds is the individual brilliance of players that individually are brilliant, but just not cohesive as a unit. The source of all of this is Billy Beane, the Oakland Athletics, and Moneyball. It started with baseball. Baseball is where you have truly had an incredibly data-driven sport throughout its history, but in particular since it evolved to another level with far deeper statistics than what it's always contained. Going into the expanded standings, you can already get a better picture of how the teams actually look than what you see from just the generic standings. First off, for us, we are a minus 30 on the run differential. That's worrying. But we are 1-2 at home. We are 1-2 at home. We are 5-6 on the road. Now, 5-6 for an away record, that's pretty good. 1-2 at home is not, but that could be for any number of reasons. It's only 3 games. We could have been playing Monterey, who is nearly undefeated for those 3 games. I don't know who we did play, but it could have been a really good opponent. A couple things that aren't terribly concerning: extra innings, 1-1, 1-run ball games, 3-3. So we're not underperforming or overperforming in any particular way. And on the surface, you would think that we are destined to a 500 record or maybe better than a 500 record. But one thing that does stand out is we are not looking like Albuquerque or Oklahoma City or Monterey. We are not one of those dominant teams that looks like they're headed to promotion right now. One thing we are headed to is we are a team on a relatively low payroll right now that has potentially a whole lot of money to play with. So how do we address that? That's going to be a big topic here on what we do in the short term. Because at the moment, it looks like we are okay for the level that we're in. We're not outstanding. We're not bad. I'm not concerned by the fact that we are last place in this league because we don't look like San Antonio, who did manage to beat us once out of the three times we played. But that, another factor into getting some road wins. We got 2 of those road wins against a San Antonio who is struggling to get very many wins. And we were barely better than that team. Richmond Fighting Lions are 4-10. There are worrying signs if you are one of those teams. We're not. But we're definitely not one of those teams that is standing out right now as a dominant force, which means if we're not headed for promotion right now, instead of trying to go into a win now philosophy where we're going to try to get promoted so that we're at that higher level and then stabilize, I think we're more likely to consider the long term, sacrifice this season early on so that we are already preparing ourselves for success in the long term, right? Sacrifice a season or 2 now to build for the future. And if we only have a couple tradable assets and neither one of them is particularly young, I already mentioned it last episode, but I really think that those tradable assets are something I want to make use of. But how well can we trust our scouting? How well can we trust what we get in return is a pretty big if. Going forward another week now, we sit at 8-13. So this week was worse than the previous ones. I don't know if we were playing at home or away on that. Again, if we were away, that can still help balance out long term by getting some more home games. Either way, definitely not looking good, right? But starting to break down how the team is performing, because this is where the personnel, where we're going to need to do things, where we're going to need to alter things, where we're going to need to start as a team that's building for the future or commit to something now. But again, the rate we're headed, I think I know where we're going. But let's take a look at the roster. Now, our 2 key guys, of course, are Pedrero. And through 21 games, Pedrero has 8 home runs already, 18 RBI, meaning he's getting almost 1 run batted in per inning. Per game. And that's a pretty big number, right? Over a 144 game season, that's going to be 100 plus RBI. And 100 plus RBI with a 162 game season is a solid number. So he is headed for a big offensive year at this rate. He's headed for lots of home runs. He's got a high slugging percentage, on-base percentage. Those numbers are all looking good. Eventually, I'll break those kind of numbers down for those of you who are not terribly familiar with the sport of baseball. But for now, he's doing really well offensively. So Pedrero is putting up really big numbers compared to the league, which makes sense considering he is quality for major league level, and a lot of the opposition is not. So it makes sense that he would put up big numbers. Flint also doing really well. He's not hitting quite as high in terms of batting percentage, but he's only 1 behind on the home runs. He's only a handful behind in RBIs, and he's putting up fairly similar numbers, albeit at like 5 years younger than Pedrero. So Flint might be something to hang on to not for certainly long term, but for a few years, he could absolutely contribute. Now, looking a little further, the runs batted in is certainly a huge one, and Nixon is looking really good. He's up here on our charts for quite a few things. Nance is up here, though not in the RBI department. But is Nance my leadoff hitter? I think he might be. In which case, a nearly 400 on base percentage. That's 2 out of every 5 times he steps to the plate, he's getting on base, and that's something you do want. ERA not looking great. Our ace, our number one pitcher, only at 4.5. He's given up 4.5 runs per game on average for a 9-inning game. So every 2 innings, he's given up a run. Not a great number for your leader. You want much, much better than that. I mean, we like to be a lot closer to 3, but pitching staff is not our strength, right? We have 2 strong batters, and that's about it, right? It really drops off. Bell is leading the way in terms of strikeouts. K's are at 29. Bradshaw, Workman, Flores, Valcourt getting up there, but you could tell our weakness is absolutely our pitching staff. Speaking of that pitching staff, there you go. We are just getting into our 5th time through the rotation, that is. And 2-1 for Bell. I mean, he's at least getting some results. But Galinas, that's a terrible ERA. Valcourt, that's really poor as well. WHIP, I think, matters a little more than things like ERA at this stage. If we're thinking long-term, building long-term. So WHIP is walks and hits. That's the WH per inning pitched. So that's the combination of how many people you're letting get on the base paths. Because what happens when they're out there, there's so many factors that go into it. But how often they get out there, a lot of that comes down to the pitcher. So I think that's a better stat. And you could see that Bell and Bradshaw, very consistent with each other. Gonzalez, not that far behind them. Valcourt, I think Valcourt's getting punished more than he should. He's a 1.88 on that WHIP, but that ERA is pretty high. He has managed to get a win, which means he has not been terrible across the board. Galinas, though, has been. No wins, very high ERA, very high WHIP. 1.88 is pretty bad too. But when you start looking at the relievers, what are our other options? They're not looking good either. Caballero, 7 games already. His ERA is much better. His WHIP is comparable to Valcourt. Maybe I need to swap those two and let him be the starter. But it's only 4 games. Still a small sample size at this point. It's hard to tell if it's going to stay in that manner. Our setup and closer, though, they are absolutely leading the way in terms of performance. Brandon Workman, he is our work man. He's the workhorse. He's got 12 games in which he's pitched already. 1 win, no losses. That's good. His ERA is definitely not great, but his WHIP is best on the team outside of our closer. I think he's been punished a little more than he should be at this stage. All right, let's not get too deep into the details of our hitters at this stage, but let's take a look at what are the easier kind of throw it all together. Here's your how they're doing kind of performance, and that's wins above replacement, meaning a replacement, an average player in the league. If they have a negative number, they are a below average player in the league. If they have a positive number, they're above average. So you can see Flint already has 1 win above a replacement level player, meaning he's already helped us earn one of those wins that we have. Sam Nance is doing a great job. So yes, those two are doing quite well. Our catcher is almost average. It's not too bad. Janord is somebody we are worrying about because he's played in all 21 games. I think he's my number 9 guy DH right now. He is only in because I literally don't have any other options. And he's hitting 187 and really low on base percentage. His slugging is not much better, and yes, you can see why he is not doing well. Now, Danny Santana is the outfielder that should be starting, but he's on a long-term injury that he's still probably got about 2 months until he's going to be eligible to play, and I only have 3 outfielders otherwise, and one of them, Uceta, who is a backup to Pedrero and should be backing up the other 3, is forcibly starting right now, and he's only hitting 117. So I see 2 guys that absolutely need to get replaced in our lineup. I see 1 pitcher who absolutely needs to get replaced in that lineup. Those 3 changes could potentially make the team a 500 level team. But how do you go about changing that? Looking at the right-hand column now, we are still last place, and we're a little further adrift at 4 games behind now. So where we were 2.5, and it was close, we're starting to trail. But look who was on top and has now fallen to 4th place. It can change pretty quickly this early in the season. Record at home is just 3-6. On the road, that hurts because that means we were at home for most of the games this season, or this week, in which we lost a lot of those. But the extra inning games, we had close games here. We had close games that did not go our way. So maybe a little bit of being unlucky, close games, change those few players out, and maybe we're in better shape. But just 2-5 to start the month of May. As a team, offensively, so our batting stats and rankings, where we fit in the USL. Okay, now, USL, that is the US League. That means there are 15 teams. This is not the wider professional league that we are a part of with all 30. This is the breakdown of the 15 on our side of it. You have the United States League, and then we have the International League. So the USL, that's rankings out of 15, meaning we are dead last in strikeouts. We are middle of the road in extra base hits, meaning you've got a single base hit. A double, a triple, or a homer are extra base hits, meaning you got more than just the 1 base. We're doing good there. That makes sense when we have some guys that hit with power. Slugging, likewise, is higher. Batting average is tolerable, but we've got those couple guys that are really offsetting the numbers compared to everybody else. That's where we need to make a change offensively. Defensively, I told you this is the one I was worried about, and you can see that we are not even in the top 10 in any category, meaning we are in the bottom third in every single category. We are dead last in a couple home runs allowed and starters ERA. So our starters are doing really poor, those 2 guys in particular. Overall team earned run average, that's the ERA, by the way. Earned runs, in short, difference between an earned run and a run is if there is an error involved, meaning somebody has a routine play that they are expected to complete and then don't complete. They make a mistake. The mistake is on them. It is not then. It kind of becomes that individual's responsibility, and you don't put that one on the pitcher any longer. So that one becomes kind of a free run. But the other guys, they're still responsible for. So if that guy's sitting on first base because the shortstop made an error, he bobbled the ball and doesn't get the throw in time to get the guy out. So then the guy is sitting on first base, and the next guy up hits a home run, cracks that one deep, 2 runs score. 1 run is counted to the pitcher, the guy who hit the homer, right? That was on him. The guy on first was not. Okay. Anyway, continuing on here, we have 13th and below in virtually everything except for strikeouts. In everything except for strikeouts. So really, really bad on the pitching staff, meaning we are very much a team that belongs in rebuild mode anyway. And I was thinking about doing that in the first place. Now, again, there's a few obvious changes to make. After that, though, I do think Pedrero in particular, even though he is absolutely playing lights out, absolutely playing lights out, but I think he is very expendable if we're this bad anyway. You can see Danny Santana, the injured left fielder. 31, of course. This is somebody who played for Boston last year. 38 games, 116 at bats, but it's 31 years of age. So this is kind of a career backup who's hovered between AAA, AA, and just on the fringes of major leagues. And he's got a long-term injury that has made us that much worse. But our offense hasn't necessarily been the problem. It's that defense, right? It's the pitching staff that has struggled the most. Now, a quick look at our AAA, AA, single A teams. Their records suggest that they're a little bit better off than our senior team. And I think that's the first set of moves we need to be considering. Remember, we had a roster that was already pre-filled out. There could be, and probably is, better talent than some of the guys that are playing at the senior level, as we had a pretty poor half of the roster. So yeah, the guys on the bench are probably among those, but there's going to be some starters that are among that really poor half. So we are going to make our first moves within our own organization and bring some guys up from AAA or AA that are going to be an improvement, especially on these guys that are really struggling early on. Janord, Uceta, and some pitchers. All right, I made a lot more than 3 changes. Let's start with the pitching staff. Here alone, I made 3 changes. Let's begin with the bullpen. I added Josh Sidney, who was actually my Class A closer and is actually the best rated player in our minor league system. Just 23 years of age. Not a fantastic player, but a very evenly balanced player. His stuff, his movement, his control, and stamina are all very neutral, very okay, very workmanlike. So we've got him as our 7th inning guy, adding into the mix, and then we'll see how he performs long term. And then remember how we had 2 pitchers with very, very high ERAs? They're both gone. Replacing them is our 2 top AAA guys, Jamar Fussell at 29 years of age, 2.5 stars, and he has done well in AAA so far, and you see he's got good stuff and good control. And then Tony Rivera, a left-hander who replaced the left-hander who is outgoing. You see he's also done well at the AAA level, and his stuff is not quite as fantastic, but he's definitely got better stamina, and the movement's still okay. I mean, these guys are very average, but at 2.5 stars, they are both better than the 1.5 stars they are guys that they're replacing, guys that were 35, 40s. So they should perform better. You can see we still have a few very, very weak pitchers on staff at this point. Guys that have done more or less okay. You can see McGee looks to be on the verge of at least being 2 stars. He's almost there. These 2 are a bit further down. And just like the pitching staff, I've made 3 changes here to the lineup as well. For the lineup, here's what's different. We've added Aaron Akins, 2.5 star player, third base. We've also added Nick Cornegay, and he comes in capable of playing second base, and I think he could be taking over for Nick Carlson, and maybe not. We'll kind of see how things go. Good defender, better second baseman than he is a shortstop, but he's very just average. He's not going to add a lot to us. And Nate Carlson is actually a decent batter. He's just slow, not a great defender, and hasn't done terribly bad. I mean, how is he doing? 226. So we'll see in time how that one works out. But Aikens has taken over for that DH role from Janord, who's been terrible. I mean, hitting 187. He's not doing well at all. But the other one we brought up was Carrillo, and Carrillo is going to replace Usetti as the backup in the outfield. And of course, with Danny Santana still hurt, he should technically be on the suspension. Oof. Suspension. It's not injury. He's suspended for 3 months. I can guess one reason why that one would come up. I think that's all you're going to need to know on that. But anyway, Carrillo is a huge upgrade from Usetti. So even though he's not going to officially be in the lineup while he's waiting for Santana to come and fill his spot, it is Carrillo who will be filling in. And the nice thing I like about Carrillo, other than being very average and actually being our best outfield defender, is his speed. He's good at bunting, great at bunting for a hit, which I like that because his contact level is not very high, which means he could bunt for singles. So those 6 players that we just brought in, I think 4 of them are going to have an immediate impact. 2 of them are going to add some depth to what we have, and it's only going to make us better. It's only going to make us better. Now, of course, it just gutted whatever depth we had in the minor leagues, but what's it there for other than to help build your major league program in the long term anyway? If it could do it immediately, duh, it's a no-brainer. Do it. One day, I go forward a single day, and Pedrero has a partially torn labrum. He will be out for 6 weeks. Mr. Trade Bait, Mr. Guy that I want to move on for prospects, his stock just went down a lot. Let me finish out a week here so we can wrap up the episode and see if we have any improvement. I don't know if we're going to have it without our star player, though. 2-4 since the injury. So without Pedrero, we are definitely losing more games than we were losing before he went down injured, even with the improvement. Couple things, though. Our home record has improved. It's 5-8, but we're 5-10 on the road, meaning we've lost 4 straight on the road since where we last played on the road when we were 5-6. But extra inning games really going against us, right? This is really showing that we are just a step below everybody else. 1-5 in extra inning games, so everybody else has that edge. We've lost 4 straight after we did win at least initially a couple. Let's take a very, very, very quick look at how these guys are. Okay, in their first couple of games, Fussell and Rivera have both done really, really well. They've been outstanding. 3 total games between the 2 of them, 2 wins, very low ERA and WHIP, looking really good there. The other new guy, Sidney, not good in his start. 2 losses out of 3 games played, really high ERA. So we might have got a little too deep to get him. We'll see. 23 games. It's only a couple innings. You never know, right? Taking a look at Aikens. Not a great start there. Again, these guys coming in are not good. They should be better. Cornegay is doing okay since coming in. He's actually got 4 RBI already. He's doing better than Aikens, so maybe we need to put him into that DH spot. They've had the same number of at-bats. In baseball, 23 at-bats is nothing. It is such a tiny, tiny, tiny sample size. Can change in an instant. Carrillo has not done well. He's only had 3 hits and 20 at-bats, but his on-base percentage is much higher than his average, and even his slugging is kind of okay. 4 strikeouts isn't great, but out of 20, that's certainly not bad. And he's drawn a few walks, so he has as many walks as he has hits. You can see compared to like Aikens, who's a minus 0.3, he's only a 0.1 negative. So I think he's giving us something defensively, or when you throw in those walks, maybe he's got some steals, whatever it is, he's balancing it out a lot better than Usetti was, who was doing not only batting poorly, but not doing anything else on top of it. Carrillo might be not getting the hits out of this small sample size, but he's definitely doing other things. So those players are definitely a step in the right direction. They are better than they were, but 6 weeks without Pedrero it's already showing to be quite painful. I think ultimately we need to wait for him to get healthy. Our record is probably not going to be good for the next 5 weeks while we're waiting for that to happen. And then when he gets healthy, sure, our record would be better, but it wouldn't be good. And I think we're going to be well below 500 this season with this roster. It just does not look like a team that is destined to win too many games, in which case I think we need to go into rebuild mode. Let me know in the comments below if you do think that moving Pedrero is the right move. Should we move Flint? Flint is our other player who is much too good for this level. Is it right to move him as well? He's 28. Or do we try to hang on to him and start building around him as long as he remains affordable for us? And meanwhile, there's nobody else to build around, which means we've got a lot of work to do in terms of getting after free agents, in terms of the draft, in terms of trades, whatever we can. What do we have to offer up in return? We have 2 players that people would love to have. That's all we have. So it's going to be a difficult ask to do much in the trade market short term. Free agency, I think, is a much better place for us, as if we keep our salary quite low, then we have tons of flexibility in that area. That's going to do it for this episode, though. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.